Have you ever heard a sentence so unexpected that it completely stopped you in your tracks? One sunny afternoon, my daughter asked our neighbor a simple question. It was a question I had never thought to ask myself, even though I had noticed the same thing for years. The answer she gave revealed a secret that had been quietly hidden behind a smile, and what happened next changed the way I looked at kindness forever. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartwarming stories that restore faith in humanity, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Echoes of Hope, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us share more stories that remind the world how powerful kindness can be. My name is Ryan, and for the past 8 years, it had been just me and my daughter, Lily. After my wife passed away from cancer, life became a balancing act. I worked full-time, cooked meals, helped with homework, cleaned the house, and tried my best to be both a father and a mother to Lily. It wasn't always easy. There were days when I felt exhausted before breakfast. There were nights when I sat alone after Lily went to sleep and wondered if I was doing enough. But every Saturday morning, no matter how busy life became, I mowed the lawn. It was a small thing, but it gave me a sense of control. The sound of the mower, the smell of fresh-cut grass, and the neat lines across the yard helped clear my mind. And every Saturday, without fail, our neighbor Mrs. Harper sat on her front porch with a cup of coffee. She lived alone in the blue house next door. She was probably in her 70s, always dressed neatly, always smiling warmly whenever we crossed paths. I often waved. She always waved back. But I noticed something strange. Whenever I mowed the lawn, she watched. Not in a creepy way, just quietly, almost thoughtfully. Sometimes she'd sit there for the entire hour. I assumed she simply enjoyed being outside. After a while, I stopped thinking about it. Then one Saturday changed everything. Lily was 9 years old and blessed with the kind of curiosity that could make strangers laugh and adults uncomfortable. That morning, I was halfway through mowing when she wandered over to the fence that separated our yards. Mrs. Harper was sitting on her porch as usual. I didn't pay much attention at first. Then I noticed Lily talking to her. A few moments later, both of them looked in my direction. Mrs. Harper's smile faded. She lowered her eyes. Even from across the yard, I could tell something serious had been said. When I finished mowing, Lily ran over. "Dad," she said. "What?" She hesitated. "Mrs. Harper is crying." I immediately walked toward the fence. Mrs. Harper quickly wiped her eyes and tried to smile. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to worry anyone. Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded. Then Lily spoke. I asked her why she always watches you mow the lawn. Mrs. Harper looked down at her coffee cup. For several seconds, nobody said a word. Then she finally answered. "Because your father reminds me of my husband." The air seemed to stand still. I wasn't expecting that. Mrs. Harper looked at me with tears in her eyes. "My husband, Frank, used to mow our lawn every Saturday morning. Every single week for 43 years. Her voice trembled. He passed away 6 years ago." I felt my chest tighten. She continued softly. "When I see you out there pushing that mower, smiling at your daughter, taking care of your home, for a little while, it feels like he's still here." Neither Lily nor I knew what to say. Mrs. Harper wiped another tear away. "I know it sounds silly." "It doesn't sound silly at all," I said. But she wasn't finished. There was something else. She looked directly at me. The first year after Frank died, I was completely lost. I hardly left the house. I barely spoke to anyone. I listened quietly. One Saturday, I was sitting on this porch crying. I didn't think anyone noticed. She smiled sadly. "But your daughter did." I looked at Lily. Her eyes widened. She clearly didn't remember.
Welcome back to the show,
Mrs. Harper continued.
Today we are diving deep into
She couldn't have been more than 3 years old.
and how you can unlock
She
your
walked over with a flower she'd picked from your yard.
first step.
Lily
Welcome back to
smiled.
the show, everyone. Today
I
we
did.
are diving deep into
Mrs. Harper
creative
nodded.
mindsets and how
She
you can
handed it to
unlock
me
your
and
own
said,
potential.
"My daddy
It's all
says
about
flowers
taking
help
that
when
very
people are
first step.
sad."
Welcome back to
A
the
lump
show,
formed in
everyone.
my
Today
throat.
we are diving deep into
Mrs. Harper
creative
laughed through her
mindsets
tears.
and how you can unlock
Then
your
she
own
hugged
potential.
me and ran
It's all
away.
about taking that very
Lily
first step.
giggled.
Welcome back to
That
the show,
sounded
everyone.
exactly
Today
like
we are
something she
diving
would
deep
do.
into creative mindsets
Mrs. Harper looked at us
and how you
both.
can unlock your own potential.
That little
It is
flower
all
was
about
the
taking
first
that
act of
very
kindness
first
I'd
step.
received since
Welcome
losing
back to the
Frank.
show, everyone. Today we
Her
are
voice
diving
cracked.
deep into creative
It may
mindsets
seem small,
and how
but
you
it
can
gave me
unlock
enough
your own
strength to
potential.
keep
It
going.
is all about taking that
I
very
stood there
first step.
speechless.
Welcome back to the show,
For
everyone.
years,
Today
I had
we are
worried
diving
about
deep
whether I was
into
raising
creative
Lily the right
mindsets
way.
and how you
I
can
worried
unlock
about
your own
mistakes.
potential. It is all about
I
taking
worried
that
about
very
not
first
being
step.
enough.
Welcome back to
And
the show,
all
everyone.
along,
Today
a simple
we are
lesson
diving
about
deep
kindness
into
had grown
creative
into something
mindsets
far bigger than I
and how you can
realized.
unlock your own potential.
Mrs.
It is
Harper
all about
smiled.
taking that very first step.
Your daughter probably
Welcome back
forgot
to the
about
show,
it the next
everyone.
day.
Today we are diving
Lily
deep into
nodded.
creative mindsets
I kind of
and
did.
how you can unlock your own
Mrs.
potential.
Harper
It is
laughed.
all about taking that
But I
very
never
first step.
forgot.
Welcome back
The
to the
three
show,
of us
everyone.
sat together
Today
on the
we are
porch
diving
that
deep
afternoon.
into creative mindsets
For the first time,
and how you
Mrs.
can
Harper
unlock your
shared
own
stories
potential.
about
It is
Frank.
all about taking that very
She told
first
us
step.
about their first date,
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
their
Today
wedding,
we are diving deep
the road
into
trips they
creative
took across
mindsets
America,
and how you can unlock
the silly
your own
arguments
potential.
they had
It is
over
all about
gardening.
taking that very first
For
step.
hours, she
Welcome
laughed
back to
and
the show,
cried and
everyone.
remembered.
Today we are diving deep
And for the
into
first time in
creative
years,
mindsets
she didn't seem
and how
lonely.
you can unlock your own potential.
After that
It is
day,
all about
things
taking that
changed.
very first step.
Lily
Welcome
started
back to the
visiting
show,
Mrs.
everyone.
Harper
Today
every
we are
week.
diving deep into
Sometimes they
creative
baked
mindsets
cookies.
and how you can unlock
Sometimes
your
they
own
worked in the
potential. It
garden.
is all about taking that very
Sometimes
first
they
step.
simply sat on the
Welcome back
porch
to the
and
show,
talked.
everyone. Today we are
And
diving
every
deep
Saturday
into
morning,
creative
I still
mindsets
mowed the lawn.
and how you can unlock
But
your own
now,
potential.
instead
It
of
is all
watching
about
from a
taking that
distance,
very first
Mrs.
step.
Harper would wave me
Welcome
over
back to the show,
afterward for
everyone.
lemonade.
Today we are diving deep
What began
into
as a
creative
simple neighborly
mindsets
relationship
and
became
how you
something
can
that
unlock
felt
your
like
own
family.
potential. It is all about
Months
taking that
later,
very first
Mrs.
step.
Harper told me something
Welcome
I'll
back
never
to the show,
forget.
everyone. Today we are
She
diving
said,
deep
"Most
into
people think
creative
kindness
mindsets
has to be something
and
big
how
to
you can
matter."
unlock your own potential.
Then she
It is
shook
all
her
about
head.
taking that very first
But the
step.
moments that save
Welcome
us are
back to the
usually
show,
the
everyone.
smallest
Today
ones.
we are diving deep
A
into
flower,
creative mindsets
a
and
smile,
how you can unlock your
a
own
wave,
potential. It is all about
a
taking
conversation,
that very first step.
a few
Welcome
minutes
back
of
to the show,
someone's
everyone.
time.
Today we are diving
Those
deep
tiny
into
acts can
creative
carry people
mindsets
through their
and
darkest
how
days.
you can unlock your own potential.
Years have
It is
passed
all
since
about taking
then,
that
but
very
her
first
words
step.
remain with me.
Welcome back to the show,
We never
everyone.
truly
Today
know
we are
what someone
diving
is
deep
carrying
into
inside.
creative mindsets
The person
and how you can
smiling at
unlock
us
your
may
own
be
potential.
grieving.
It is all about
The
taking that
stranger we
very
pass
first
may
step.
be lonely.
Welcome back to the show,
The neighbor
everyone.
watching
Today we are
quietly from a
diving
porch
deep
may
into
simply be
creative
holding on to a
mindsets
memory.
and how you can unlock
And
your own
sometimes,
potential.
a
It is
small
all
act of
about
kindness
taking that
becomes a
very
light
first
they
step.
never forget.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
So today,
we are
wherever
diving
you
deep
are,
into
remember
creative
this.
mindsets
Kindness doesn't
and
need
how you
money,
can unlock your
power,
own
or
potential.
perfect
It is all
timing.
about taking that very
It only
first step.
requires a willing heart.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
A simple
Today we are
gesture can
diving
change
deep
someone's
into
day.
creative mindsets
A thoughtful
and how you
word can
unlock
change
your own
someone's
potential.
week.
It is all about taking
And a
that
moment
very
of compassion
first
can change
step.
someone's
Welcome back to the
life.
show, everyone. Today
If
we
this
are
story
diving
touched
deep
your
into
heart,
creative
share it with someone who
mindsets
needs a
and
reminder
how
that
you can
kindness
unlock
still
your own
exists.
potential. It is all about taking
Because the
that very
smallest
first
acts
step.
often leave the biggest
Welcome back to the
echoes.
show, everyone. Today we
And
are
sometimes,
diving deep
the
into
kindness you
creative
barely
mindsets
remember becomes the
and how
reason
you can
someone else
unlock your
keeps
own
believing in
potential.
hope.
It is all about taking that very
A year
first step.
passed, and Mrs.
Welcome back to
Harper
the
became
show,
a
everyone.
regular part of
Today
our
we are
lives.
diving deep into
What
creative
started with a
mindsets
flower and a
and how you can
conversation had
unlock your
grown
own
into
potential.
something
It is
beautiful.
all about taking that very
Lily
first
treated
step.
her like a grandmother,
Welcome back to
and
the
Mrs.
show,
Harper
everyone.
adored
Today
her
we are
like
diving
family.
deep into creative
Every Wednesday
mindsets
after school,
and how you
Lily
can
would
unlock
run
your
next
own
door
potential.
before
It
even
is all
taking
about
off her
taking that very
backpack.
first step.
Sometimes
Welcome
they
back to the
baked
show,
apple
everyone.
pie.
Today we are diving deep
Sometimes
into
they planted
creative
flowers.
mindsets and how you can
Sometimes
unlock
they
your own
simply sat
potential.
together
It
on
is
the
all about
porch,
taking that
sharing sharing stories. For the first time in a long time, Mrs. Harper didn't seem alone. And honestly, neither did we. Then one cold November afternoon, something happened that none of us expected. I came home from work and noticed an ambulance parked outside Mrs. Harper's house. My heart immediately dropped.
Welcome back.
I rushed over.
Today we are diving.
The paramedics were helping her onto a stretcher.
And how you can.
She looked pale and weak.
It is all about taking
Mrs.
that very
Harper.
first step.
Lily cried as she ran toward her.
Today we are diving deep.
Mrs. Harper managed a small smile.
And how you can unlock
I'm
your own
okay,
potential.
sweetheart.
It is all about taking that
But we
very
could
first
tell she
step.
wasn't.
Welcome back to the show.
The doctors
everyone.
later
Today
discovered
we're
she had a
diving
serious
deep
heart
into creative
condition.
mindsets.
She would
And how
need
you can
treatment and
unlock
months
your
of
own
recovery.
It is all about taking
At
that
78
very
years
first
old,
step.
living alone
Welcome back to
suddenly
the show,
became much
everyone. Today
harder.
we are diving deep
For the next
into
several
creative
weeks,
mindsets.
her house sat
And how
quiet.
you can unlock your own
The
potential.
porch where
It
she
is all
usually
about
drank
taking that
coffee
very
remained
first step.
empty.
Welcome back to
Every
the show,
Saturday
everyone.
morning,
Today we
I
are
found
diving
myself
deep
looking
into
toward it while
creative
mowing the
mindsets.
lawn.
And how you
The
can unlock
emptiness
your own
felt
potential.
strange.
It is all about taking
Lily
that
felt
very
it
first
too.
step. Welcome
One
back to the
evening
show,
she sat
everyone.
quietly
Today we
at the
are
dinner
diving
table.
deep into creative
Dad?
mindsets. And
Yeah.
how you can unlock your own
What if
potential.
Mrs.
It
Harper
is
gets
all about
lonely
taking
at the
that very
hospital?
first step.
The question
Welcome back
hit
to the
me
show,
hard,
everyone. Today we are
because I
diving deep
remembered
into
exactly
creative
how
mindsets.
loneliness felt.
And how you can
I
unlock your
remembered
own
hospital
potential. It
rooms.
is all about taking that
I
very
remembered
first step.
fear.
Welcome back to the
I
show,
remembered
everyone.
sitting
Today
beside
we
my
are
wife
diving
when she
deep
was
into
sick.
creative mindsets.
Nobody should face
How
that
you can
alone.
unlock your own potential.
The next
It is all
day,
about
Lily
taking
and
that
I
very
visited
first
Mrs.
step.
Harper.
Welcome back to the
Her
show,
face
everyone.
lit up the
Today
moment
we are
she saw
diving
us.
deep into creative
You
mindsets.
came.
And how
Of
you
course
can
we
unlock your own
came,
potential.
Lily
It
said.
is all about taking that
Mrs.
very
Harper
first step.
laughed.
Welcome back to
Then
the
she
show,
started
everyone.
crying.
Today we are diving deep
Not
into
because she was
creative
sad,
mindsets. And
because
how
she
you can
was
unlock your
grateful.
own potential. It is
Over
all
the
about
next few
taking that
months,
very
we
first
visited
step.
every week.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
Lily brought
Today we are
handmade
diving
cards.
deep into creative
We brought
mindsets.
meals.
And how you can unlock
Sometimes
your own
we
potential.
simply
It
sat
is
and
all
listened.
about taking that very first
And
step.
slowly, Mrs.
Welcome back
Harper
to the
grew
show,
stronger.
everyone. Today we are diving
One
deep
afternoon,
into
while we
creative
were talking,
mindsets.
she said
And how
something
you can unlock
surprising.
your own potential.
You
It is all
know,
about
after
taking
Frank
that very
died,
first
I
step.
thought my story was
Welcome back to
over.
the show, everyone. Today
I shook
we are
my
diving
head.
deep into creative
No.
mindsets.
She
And how you
smiled.
can unlock your own potential.
I really
It is all
believe
about
that.
taking that very first
Then
step.
she looked at Lily.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
But this little
Today we
girl
are
gave me
diving
a
deep
second
into
chapter.
creative mindsets.
Lily
And
blushed.
how you can unlock your own
Mrs.
potential.
Harper
It is
continued.
all about taking that very
People
first
think
step.
family is only the
Welcome
people
back to
you're
the show,
born with.
everyone. Today we are diving
She reached
deep
for Lily's
into
hand.
creative mindsets.
But sometimes
And how you can
family
unlock
is the
your own
people who
potential.
choose to
It is
stay.
all about taking that very
None of
first
us said
step.
anything.
Welcome back to the show.
The room
everyone.
felt
Today
too
we are
emotional
diving
for
deep
words.
into creative mindsets.
Spring finally
And how
arrived.
you can unlock your own
The
potential.
flowers
It is all
returned.
about taking that very
The
first
trees
step.
turned green.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
And one
Today
bright
we are
Saturday
diving
morning,
deep into
something
creative
wonderful
mindsets.
happened.
And how you
Mrs.
can unlock
Harper
your
was
own
back on her
potential.
porch.
It is all about taking that
Coffee
very
cup
first
in
step.
hand.
Welcome back to the
Just
show,
like
everyone.
old times.
Today we are diving deep
When
into
Lily saw
creative
her,
mindsets.
she ran across the
And how
yard
you
and
can
threw her
unlock your own
arms around
potential.
her.
It is all about taking
Mrs.
that
Harper
very
laughed
first
so
step.
hard she nearly
Welcome back to
spilled
the
her
show,
coffee.
everyone. Today we are diving
For a
deep
moment,
into
everything
creative
felt
mindsets.
perfect.
And how you
But
can
the
unlock
biggest
your own
surprise
potential.
came a few
It is
weeks
all
later.
about taking that very first
Mrs.
step.
Harper invited us
Welcome
over
back to
for
the show,
dinner.
everyone. Today we are
After the
diving
meal,
deep into
she handed me a
creative
small
mindsets.
wooden box.
And how you can unlock
What's
your own
this?
potential. It is all
I
about
asked.
taking that very first step.
Open it.
Welcome back to the show.
Inside
everyone.
were dozens
Today
of
we are
old
diving
photographs.
deep into creative mindsets.
Pictures of her and
And
Frank
how you
throughout
can
their
unlock your own
lives.
potential. It is all
There were
about
wedding
taking that
photos,
very first
family
step.
vacations,
Welcome back to
birthday
the show,
parties,
everyone. Today
and
we are
countless
diving
ordinary
deep
moments.
into creative mindsets.
Then I noticed an
And how you
envelope.
can unlock your own potential.
My name was
It is
written
all
on
about
it.
taking that very first
Confused, I
step. Welcome
opened
back
it.
to the show, everyone. Today
Inside
we are
was a
diving
letter.
Deep into creative
Mrs. Harper
mindsets.
watched quietly
And
as
how
I
you can
read.
unlock your own potential.
The letter
It is all
explained
about
that she had
taking that
recently
very first
updated
step.
her will.
Welcome back to the show.
My eyes
everyone.
widened.
Today we are diving deep
Mrs.
into
Harper.
creative mindsets.
She
How
smiled
you
gently.
can unlock your own potential.
I'm not
It is
leaving
all
you
about
money.
Taking that very first
I
step.
laughed nervously.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
Okay.
Today we are diving deep
She pointed
into
to the
creative
photographs.
mindsets. And how
I'm
you
leaving
can unlock
those.
Your own potential.
I
It is
stared
all
at
about
her.
Taking that very first
What?
step. Welcome back
My
to the
family
show,
lives
everyone.
far
Today
away.
We are diving deep
Most
into
of them never
creative
visit.
mindsets. And
She
how you
looked
can
at
unlock
Lily.
Your own potential.
But
It
you
is all
two
about
gave me
taking
more
that
love
very
in the
first
last
step.
few years than anyone
Welcome back to the
else.
show, everyone. Today
Tears
we are
filled her
diving
eyes.
deep into creative mindsets.
I want someone who truly
And how
cared
you can
about us
unlock
to
your
keep
own
our
potential.
memories
It
alive.
is all about taking that very
Lily
first
hugged
step.
her immediately.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
And that was
Today
when I
we are
realized
diving
something
deep into
important.
Creative mindsets.
Kindness doesn't
And how
just
you
help
can
people
unlock your own
survive
potential.
difficult
It is
moments.
all about taking that very
It creates
first step.
connections that last
Welcome
for
back to the show,
generations.
everyone. Today we are
A
diving
simple
deep
flower
into
had become a
creative
friendship.
mindsets. and how
That
you can
friendship
unlock
had
your
become
own potential.
family.
It is all about
And
taking
that family
very
had
first
changed
step.
all of our
Welcome back
lives.
to the show, everyone.
Today,
we are
whenever I
diving
mow the
deep into
lawn, I
creative
still think
mindsets
about that day
and
when
how
Lily
you can
asked a
unlock your
simple
own
question.
potential. It is all about
A question
taking
that
very
uncovered a
first step.
story hidden behind
Welcome
years
back
of
to the show,
quiet
everyone.
smiles.
Today we are diving
And
deep
every
into
time I hear
creative
the mower
mindsets
start, I
and
remember
how you
Mrs.
can
Harper's
unlock your own
words.
potential. It is all
The
about
moments
taking
that save
very
us are
first
usually
step.
the smallest
Welcome back
ones.
to the show, everyone.
She
Today
was
we are
right.
diving deep into
Because
creative
kindness is
mindsets
rarely
and
loud.
how you can unlock your
It
own
doesn't
potential.
ask for
It is
attention.
all about taking that very
It doesn't
first step.
expect rewards. It quietly plants seeds in people's hearts. And years later, those seeds bloom into something extraordinary. So if you're watching this today, never underestimate the power of one small act of kindness. A smile. A conversation. A flower. A few minutes of your time. You may forget it tomorrow. But someone else might remember it for the rest of their life. And just like Lily's simple gift changed Mrs. Harper's world, your kindness might become the beginning of someone else's second chapter.